The rope burns on Melody Keene's wrists were nothing compared to the shame that burned in her chest as she stood on that auction block in Wilcox, Arizona territory, her eyes fixed on the dusty wooden planks beneath her bare feet. It was August 1883, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the small crowd gathered in the town square, most of them looking anywhere but at her face. She had known these people her whole life, had gone to church with them, had traded goods with them at the general store, and now they watched as her uncle prepared to sell her like livestock to pay for her dying mother's medicine. The medicine that had arrived too late anyway. Her mother had died 3 days ago, leaving behind nothing but debt and a daughter nobody wanted. "Do I hear $50? Her Uncle Raymond called out, his voice thick with whiskey even at 10 in the morning. "She's strong, can cook, clean, and she's got all her teeth." Melody wanted to die. She wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole. This could not be happening. This could not be real. But the rope around her wrists was real enough, and so was the greedy gleam in her uncle's eyes as he waited for someone, anyone, to make a bid. The crowd shuffled uncomfortably. A few men looked interested, but their wives pulled them back with sharp glares. Melody knew what they were thinking. What kind of work would a man buy a woman for in these parts? Nothing respectable, that was certain. $50, a voice called from the back of the crowd, deep and rough like gravel. Everyone turned to look. Melody lifted her eyes for the first time since being dragged up onto the platform and saw a tall man pushing through the gathered townspeople. He wore a dusty brown hat pulled low over his face, and his clothes marked him as a rancher, work-worn and practical. He was broad-shouldered and moved with a deliberate slowness that spoke of contained strength. "Well now, we got ourselves a bidder," her uncle said, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "Anyone want to go higher? She's worth more than 50, I guarantee it." Silence. The crowd was already dispersing, uncomfortable with the whole spectacle. Raymond's face reddened with anger and embarrassment, but he could not wait any longer. He needed that money, needed it to pay off his gambling debts more than he had ever needed it for medicine. "Sold to the gentleman for $50, Raymond finally announced. The tall man approached the platform, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small leather pouch. He counted out the coins with careful precision, placing them one by one into Raymond's outstretched palm. Melody noticed his hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of someone who worked hard for everything he had. "She's all yours," Raymond said with a cruel smile, pocketing the money. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "Here's the contract. She's bound to you for 7 years of service to pay off the debt. Can't run away, can't refuse work, all legal and proper." The stranger took the paper without looking at it, then turned his attention to Melody for the first time. She tried to meet his gaze but could only manage a brief glance. His eyes were a startling blue, like the sky after a storm, and they held something she had not expected to see. Not pity exactly, but not the hungry look she had feared either. "Can you walk?" he asked her quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch away if she wanted to, and untied the rope from her wrists. The relief was immediate, and she rubbed at the raw skin, feeling the sting of air on the open wounds. "Get your things," he said. "I do not have anything," Melody whispered. "My uncle sold everything to pay for the medicine." The stranger's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble on his face. He turned back to Raymond, who was counting his coins with single-minded focus. "Where's her mother buried?" the stranger asked. Raymond looked up, annoyed. "Cemetery on the hill." "Why?" "Just wondering if you sold the burial plot too." Raymond's face went red. "Now you listen here. I did what I had to do. That woman and her medical bills near ruined me. I got a right to recoup my losses." You got your money. We are done here." The stranger placed a hand lightly on Melody's elbow, guiding her down from the platform. She stumbled on the steps, weak from not eating properly for days, and he caught her easily, steadying her with a gentle grip. They walked through town in silence, Melody acutely aware of the eyes watching them from windows and doorways. The stranger led her to a wagon hitched outside the general store, the bed loaded with supplies. He helped her up onto the bench seat with careful hands, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they pulled away from town, Melody finally found her voice. "What is your name?" "Ashton Zeller," he replied, not taking his eyes off the road ahead. "I am Melody Keene," she said, though he obviously already knew that. "I know." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon rattling over the rutted dirt road that led out of Wilcox and into the open country beyond. The landscape was harsh and beautiful at the same time, all red rock and scrub brush under an endless blue sky. Mountains rose in the distance, purple shadows against the horizon. "Where are we going?" Melody asked finally. "My ranch, about an hour north of here." "What do you want me to do?" He glanced at her then, those blue eyes unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "What do you mean, the contract? What work do you want me to do?" Ashton was quiet for a long moment, then reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the paper Raymond had given him. Without taking his eyes off the road, he held it out to her. "Read it if you want." Melody took the contract with shaking hands and unfolded it. The legal language was dense and confusing, but the meaning was clear enough. She was bound to Ashton Zeller for 7 years, to perform whatever labor he required, with room and board provided but no wages. She could not leave, could not refuse, could not marry without his permission. It was slavery in everything but name. Her hands trembled as she folded the paper again. This was her life now. 7 years of servitude to a stranger, and who knew what he would demand of her. Ashton held out his hand, and she gave him back the contract, expecting him to tuck it safely away. Instead, he pulled out a match from his pocket, struck it against his boot, and held the flame to the corner of the paper. Melody watched in shock as the contract caught fire, the edges curling and blackening as the flames consumed it. Ashton held it until the heat reached his fingers, then dropped the burning paper over the side of the wagon where it fell to the road and turned to ash. "You are free," Ashton said simply. "No contract, no debt, no obligation. When we get to the ranch, you can rest up, get some food in you, and then you can decide what you want to do. If you want to leave, I will take you wherever you want to go." Melody stared at him, unable to process what had just happened. "I do not understand. You paid $50 for me. You burned the contract. Why would you do that?" Ashton was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with emotion. "About 3 years ago, my sister found herself in a similar situation. Different circumstances, but the same result. She was sold to pay off our father's debts. The man who bought her was not kind." He paused, his hands tightening on the reins. "By the time I found out and tracked them down, she was already gone. He had worked her to death in less than a year." "I am so sorry," Melody whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "I swore that day that if I ever had the chance to prevent someone else from suffering the same fate, I would take it. When I heard in town this morning what your uncle was planning, I knew I had to stop it. I could not save my sister, but I could save you." They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not uncomfortable, but contemplative. Melody found herself stealing glances at this strange man, who had bought her freedom with no expectation of anything in return. He was not young, she thought, probably in his early 30s, with lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun and a weariness in his posture that spoke of years of hard work and harder losses. The ranch appeared in the distance, a collection of wooden buildings clustered in a valley between low hills. There was a house, a barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Cattle dotted the landscape, grazing peacefully in the afternoon heat. "It is not much," Ashton said as they approached, "but it is home." To Melody, who had spent the last 3 years living in her uncle's cramped house while caring for her dying mother, it looked like paradise. The main house was simple but well-maintained, with a covered porch and real glass windows. Someone had planted flowers in boxes beneath the windows, though they looked neglected now, the blooms dried and brown. Ashton pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house and climbed down, then came around to help Melody. She was so tired she could barely stand, and he ended up half carrying her up the porch steps and through the front door. The interior was dim and cool after the bright heat outside. Melody had a vague impression of sturdy furniture and bare walls before Ashton guided her down a hallway to a small bedroom. "This was my sister's room," he said quietly. "Nobody has used it since. You can stay here as long as you need to." The bed looked like heaven. Melody wanted nothing more than to collapse onto it and sleep for a week, but she was too dirty, too aware of the smell of fear and sweat clinging to her skin. "Is there somewhere I can wash?" she asked. "There is a pump out back and a tub in the wash house. I will heat some water for you." Ashton hesitated in the doorway. "There should be some of Emma's clothes in the wardrobe. You are about the same size. Help yourself to whatever you need." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Melody stood in the center of the room, trying to make sense of everything that had happened in the last few hours. This morning she had been a prisoner, sold by her own blood to the highest bidder. Now she was free, in a dead woman's bedroom, being offered kindness by a stranger who expected nothing in return. She moved to the wardrobe and opened it carefully, half expecting it to be empty. But inside she found dresses, shirts, skirts, all neatly folded and waiting. She ran her hand over the fabric, feeling the quality of the cloth. These had belonged to someone who was loved, someone who was missed. The thought made her throat tighten with emotion. A soft knock on the door startled her. "Water is ready," Ashton called through the wood. Melody gathered a simple dress and some undergarments from the wardrobe and followed Ashton outside. The wash house was a small building behind the main house, steam already rising from the large metal tub inside. Ashton had laid out soap and towels, then retreated to give her privacy. She locked the door and stripped off her filthy clothes, then sank into the hot water with a sigh of pure relief. The heat soothed her aching muscles, and the rope burned on her wrists. She scrubbed herself clean, washing away the grime and shame of the auction block, then washed her hair twice until it felt clean again. When she finally emerged, dressed in Emma's clothes and feeling more human than she had in days, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. She found Ashton in the kitchen stirring a pot on the stove. The smell of cooking food made her stomach clench with hunger. "Feel better?" he asked, glancing up at her. "Much, thank you." She stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure what to do with herself. "Sit down. Food is almost ready." He gestured to the table, which was set for two. Melody sat, watching as Ashton ladled stew into bowls and cut thick slices from a loaf of bread. He set a bowl in front of her, and she had to restrain herself from falling on it like a starving animal. She could not remember the last time she had eaten a real meal. They ate in silence, but it was comfortable now. Ashton did not watch her or make her feel self-conscious. He just ate his own food and let her be. When she had finished, nearly licking the bowl clean, he refilled it without comment. She ate more slowly this time, savoring each bite. "This is very good," she said finally. "My mother's recipe. She taught me to cook before she passed, said a man should be able to feed himself." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "My father thought it was foolish, but I was grateful for it after she was gone." "Are your parents both passed?" "Mother died when I was 15. Father died 5 years ago. That is when Emma and I came out here, thought we could start fresh, build something good." His voice went flat. "Did not work out that way." Melody wanted to ask more but could see the pain in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when he spoke of his sister. She knew that kind of grief, had felt it herself just days ago when her mother finally stopped breathing. "My mother died 3 days ago," she said quietly. "The medicine my uncle bought never even had a chance to help her. By the time it arrived, she was already gone. He sold me anyway, said he still needed to recoup his costs." Ashton's hands clenched into fists on the table. "Your uncle is a worthless piece of trash." "Yes," Melody agreed simply. "He is." They cleaned up the dishes together, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. Ashton washed and Melody dried, stacking the plates in the cupboard where he indicated. When the kitchen was clean, an awkward silence fell. The sun had set completely now, and the house was dark except for the glow of the oil lamps. "You should get some rest," Ashton said finally. "You look exhausted." Melody was exhausted, bone-deep tired in a way that went beyond physical weariness. But she had one more question, one thing she needed to know. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "You said I was free to leave if I wanted, but I have nowhere to go, no money, no family except an uncle who sold me. I do not know what to do." Ashton was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the lamplight. "You can stay here as long as you need to. I am not going to throw you out. Take some time to rest, to figure out what you want. There is no rush. I cannot just stay here and do nothing. Let me help around the ranch. I can cook, clean, tend the garden. I can learn to do other things if you teach me. I want to earn my keep. You do not owe me anything, Melody, I know, but I want to help, please." He studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. We will figure something out. But for tonight, just rest." Melody made her way to Emma's room and collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to pull back the covers. She was asleep within seconds, falling into dreams filled with blue eyes and burning contracts. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere outside. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, then it all came flooding back. The auction, Ashton, the burned contract, freedom. She got up and dressed quickly in another of Emma's dresses, this one a simple blue cotton that fit her reasonably well. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found the house empty, but there was fresh coffee on the stove and bread laid out on the counter. She poured herself a cup of coffee and stood at the window, looking out at the ranch in the morning light. It was beautiful here, in a stark, lonely sort of way. The land stretched out endlessly, broken only by distant mountains and the occasional stand of trees. She could see Ashton in one of the corrals, working with a horse. Even from a distance, she could see the patience in his movements, the gentle way he approached the skittish animal. She finished her coffee and went outside, drawn by curiosity. Ashton looked up as she approached the corral fence, then returned his attention to the horse. "Good morning," he called. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in months," she admitted. "What are you doing, breaking this filly?" She was born wild, never been handled much. "Trying to get her used to a saddle." He moved slowly toward the horse, which danced away nervously. Melody watched, fascinated by his patience. He never rushed, never forced the horse to do anything. He just waited, giving the animal time to make its own decisions. After about an hour, the filly finally let him touch her shoulder. Ashton patted her gently, then stepped back and left the corral. "That is enough for today," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. She needs time to think about it. You are very patient, Melody observed. Horses respond better to patience than force. People too, I expect. He looked at her directly. Have you thought about what you want to do? I want to stay, she said firmly. If you will let me. I meant what I said last night. I want to help around the ranch. Can you really cook? Yes. My mother taught me. I can make bread, stews, roasts, pies. I can preserve food, make cheese, all of it. Can you sew? Yes. Then I have a proposition for you. I will pay you wages, same as I would pay any ranch hand. $10 a month plus room and board. You can save it. Use it however you want. In exchange, you help around the house, cook meals, maybe do some mending. I have 3 ranch hands who live in the bunkhouse, and they would appreciate decent meals instead of their own terrible cooking. $10 a month was not much, but it was more than Melody had ever had in her life. That is more than generous. It is fair, Ashton corrected. You will be working for it. I want you to understand something, though. You are not a servant here. You are not obligated to me. This is a job, same as any other. If you decide to leave, you can leave. If you decide you do not like it here, you can go. You are free, Melody. Really, truly free. Tears stung her eyes. Freedom was something she had never really had, even before the auction. She had gone from her father's house to caring for her sick mother to her uncle's control, never making decisions for herself, never having choices. Thank you, she whispered. I will work hard, I promise. I do not doubt it. Come on, let me introduce you to the hands, and you can start by making us all a decent lunch. The ranch hands were a varied bunch. There was old Pete, who was probably 60 if he was a day, with a long gray beard and a wicked sense of humor. Then there was Marcus, a former slave who had come west after the war ended, quiet and hardworking. The youngest was Danny, barely 20, eager and talkative. They all treated her with respect, tipping their hats when Ashton introduced her as the new cook and housekeeper. Melody threw herself into the work with a determination born of gratitude and a need to prove herself. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, washing windows and scrubbing floors. She organized the kitchen, took stock of the pantry and planned meals. She baked bread every morning, the smell filling the house and drifting out to the bunkhouse where the men worked. The first dinner she cooked for everyone was a roast with potatoes and carrots, fresh bread, and an apple pie she had made from dried apples she found in the pantry. The men ate like they were starving, heaping praise on her cooking between bites. Miss Melody, if you ever want to leave here, you come work for me, old Pete declared, already reaching for a second piece of pie. You do not have a ranch, you old fool, Marcus said, but he was smiling. I will get one just to hire her away, Pete shot back. Melody felt herself blushing at the praise, unused to such straightforward appreciation. She glanced at Ashton, who was eating quietly at the head of the table. He caught her eye and gave her a small nod of approval that warmed her more than all the compliments combined. The days fell into a rhythm. Melody woke early to start breakfast, then spent her mornings cleaning and mending. She cooked lunch for the men, then spent the afternoons working in the neglected garden, coaxing vegetables from the hard earth. She cooked dinner, cleaned up, and fell into bed exhausted but satisfied. Ashton was always kind but distant, treating her with unfailing respect but never pressing for conversation. He worked from dawn to dusk, maintaining the ranch, tending to the cattle, breaking horses. Sometimes Melody would watch him from the windows, admiring the easy strength in his movements, the gentleness in his hands. She tried not to think about how attractive she found him, tried to focus on her work and her newfound freedom. But it was hard when he smiled at her over dinner, hard when their hands brushed reaching for the same dish. Hard when she heard him moving around the house at night and knew he was just down the hall, A month passed, then 2. Ashton gave her wages at the end of each month, counting out the coins into her palm. She saved every penny in a small cloth bag she kept hidden in her room, watching her nest egg grow with a sense of pride and security she had never felt before. It was late October when things began to change between them. The weather had turned cold, and Melody had been working in the garden all afternoon, trying to get the last of the vegetables harvested before the first frost. She was carrying a heavy basket of squash back to the house when she slipped on a patch of mud and went down hard, the basket flying from her hands. Ashton was there in seconds, having seen her fall from the corral. He helped her up carefully, his hands gentle on her arms. "Are you hurt?" His voice was tense with concern. "Just my pride," Melody said, trying to laugh it off. But when she put weight on her left ankle, pain shot through it and she gasped. "Lean on me," Ashton ordered, and before she could protest, he had swept her up into his arms and was carrying her toward the house. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "Your ankle is already swelling. You need to stay off it." He carried her inside and set her gently on the sofa, then went to fetch water and bandages. He knelt in front of her and carefully removed her boot, his hands gentle as he examined her ankle. His touch sent shivers through her that had nothing to do with pain. "Not broken," he said finally, "but badly sprained. You need to keep off it for at least a few days." "I cannot. There is too much to do. The men need to eat, the house needs cleaning, the garden needs finishing." "The men can cook their own meals for a few days. The house can stay dirty, the garden can wait. You need to rest." His blue eyes met hers, intense and worried. "Please, Melody, let yourself heal." She nodded, unable to argue with the concern in his voice. He wrapped her ankle carefully, then propped it up on pillows. Over the next few days, Ashton took care of her. He brought her meals, changed her bandages, helped her to the washroom when she needed it. He sat with her in the evenings, reading aloud from books or just talking about the ranch, his plans for the future, stories from his past. Melody found herself falling for him, slowly and inevitably. It was not just his kindness, though that was part of it. It was the way he listened when she talked, really listened. It was the gentle humor in his eyes when she said something funny. It was the strength tempered with gentleness, the loneliness she recognized because she felt it too. But she did not say anything. He had saved her, given her a job, treated her with respect. She would not repay that by making things complicated with feelings he probably did not share. Her ankle healed, and life returned to normal. But something had shifted between them, a new awareness that made the air feel charged whenever they were in the same room. November came, bringing cold winds and the first snow. Melody woke one morning to find the world transformed, white and silent and beautiful. She stood at the kitchen window, watching the snow fall, and felt Ashton come up beside her. "First snow of the season," he said quietly. "Always my favorite." "It is beautiful," she agreed. They stood there together, shoulders almost touching, watching the snow. Melody was acutely aware of him, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the rise and fall of his breathing. "Melody," Ashton said suddenly, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him, her heart suddenly pounding. "These past few months with you here, it has been different, better. The house feels like a home again instead of just a place where I sleep." He paused, struggling for words. "I know you probably think of me as just your employer, and that is fine. I do not want to make you uncomfortable or pressure you in any way, but I need you to know that I have feelings for you. Real feelings. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. You make me laugh. You make me want to be better. And if you do not feel the same way, that is all right. Nothing has to change, but I could not keep it inside anymore." Melody stared at him, her mind reeling. You have feelings for me. Yes. I know it is probably inappropriate given how we met, given that I am technically your employer. But I cannot help how I feel. Ashton, she said softly, reaching up to touch his face. I have been falling in love with you since the day you burned that contract, since the day you gave me my freedom and expected nothing in return. I did not say anything because I thought you could never feel the same way about me. His eyes widened. You love me. Yes, I love you. He made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was kissing her, his arms coming around her and pulling her close. Melody melted into him, kissing him back with all the pent-up longing of the past months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ashton rested his forehead against hers. I have been so lonely, he whispered, for so long. And then you came into my life, and suddenly I remembered what it was like to feel something other than grief and guilt. I was dying inside, Melody confessed, watching my mother fade away, trapped in my uncle's house, no hope for anything better. And then you saved me. You gave me not just my freedom, but a reason to want it. They stood there holding each other as the snow fell outside, two lonely people who had found each other against all odds. From that day on, everything was different. They did not hide their feelings anymore. Ashton would kiss her in the kitchen when no one was looking. Melody would rest her hand on his shoulder as she served his dinner. They would sit together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, her head on his shoulder. The ranch hands noticed, of course, but they seemed happy about it. Old Pete started making jokes about weddings, and Danny asked when he should expect to be invited to the celebration. It was Danny's teasing that finally prompted Ashton to make it official. It was December, just before Christmas, when he asked Melody to take a walk with him despite the cold. They walked to the top of a small hill overlooking the ranch, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. When I bought you at that auction, Ashton said, his breath misting in the cold air, I thought I was just doing the right thing. Saving someone who needed saving, the way I could not save Emma. I never expected to find someone who made me want to live again, not just exist. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Melody Keene, I know we have not known each other very long. I know our beginning was not conventional, but I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, the way you hum when you are cooking. I love how you have brought life back to this ranch to me. Will you marry me? Melody felt tears freezing on her cheeks. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her there on the hilltop. The ranch spread out below them, their future bright with possibility. They were married on Christmas Day in Wilcox, in the same town where Melody had been auctioned off just 4 months earlier. It was a small ceremony, just the ranch hands, the preacher, and a few townspeople who had felt ashamed of what had happened and wanted to show their support. Melody wore a dress that had belonged to Emma, altered to fit her perfectly. Ashton wore his best suit, his hair slicked back, his eyes shining with happiness as he watched her walk down the aisle. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ashton kissed her so thoroughly that old Pete whistled and Marcus laughed. They held a reception at the ranch, everyone crowding into the house for food and dancing and celebration. Melody danced with Ashton, then with each of the ranch hands, then with Ashton again, never wanting the night to end. But eventually the guests left, and it was just the two of them, alone in the house that was now truly theirs. Ashton carried her over the threshold of their bedroom, the room that had been his alone but was now theirs to share. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. I love you, he said simply. I love you too, Melody replied. They came together with passion and tenderness, two people who had found home in each other's arms. The loneliness that had marked both their lives was gone, replaced by a love that felt solid and real and permanent. The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Melody thrived as a rancher's wife, managing the household with efficiency and grace. She and Ashton fell into an easy partnership, working together to keep the ranch running smoothly. In the spring, Melody discovered she was pregnant. She told Ashton one morning over breakfast, watching his face carefully for his reaction. He went very still, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. "Pregnant? Yes, I think about 3 months along. The baby should come in the fall." Ashton set down his cup and came around the table, pulling her into his arms. "A baby," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Melody asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy, Melody, I am terrified and thrilled and so full of joy I can barely breathe. We are going to be parents." The pregnancy was not easy. Melody was sick most mornings, exhausted all the time, but she refused to let it slow her down too much. Ashton fussed over her constantly, trying to make her rest, but she just laughed at him and kept working. As her belly grew, Ashton's tenderness grew with it. He would talk to the baby at night, his hand on Melody's stomach, telling their unborn child about the ranch, about the horses, about all the things they would do together. The baby came in September, after a long and difficult labor. Melody thought she might die from the pain, but Ashton never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Ashton cut the cord with shaking hands and placed their son in Melody's arms. "A boy," the midwife announced, "healthy and strong." Melody looked down at her son, overwhelmed with love so fierce it hurt. He had a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes, and she knew in that moment she would do anything to protect him. "What should we name him?" Ashton asked, his voice rough with emotion. Melody thought for a moment. "What was your father's name, Thomas, and your mother, Mary?" "Then let us call him Thomas. Thomas Zeller, after your father." Ashton's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas," he repeated, "it is perfect." Life with a baby was exhausting but wonderful. Thomas was a good baby, rarely fussing, sleeping through the night after just a few months. He had his father's patience and his mother's stubbornness, learning to crawl early and getting into everything. The ranch hands doted on him. Old Pete carved him toys, Marcus made him a small rocking horse, and Danny taught him to laugh by making funny faces. 2 years later, Melody found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, and their daughter arrived on a warm spring morning, sliding into the world with barely a cry. They named her Emma, after Ashton's sister. She had Melody's auburn hair and green eyes, and she was as different from Thomas as night from day. Where he was patient and quiet, she was loud and demanding, a force of nature from the moment she was born. Ashton loved her fiercely, this tiny girl named for the sister he had lost. He carried her everywhere, talked to her constantly, let her wrap him around her little finger. The years passed quickly. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working with his father. Emma was wild and fearless, climbing trees and riding horses almost before she could walk. When Thomas was 8 and Emma 6, Melody found herself pregnant once more. She was older now, and the pregnancy was harder, but she was determined. Their third child, another boy, arrived in the winter, during a snowstorm that trapped them all in the house for 3 days. They named him Jack, and he was the perfect combination of his siblings, serious like Thomas but adventurous like Emma. He brought a new energy to the family, keeping everyone on their toes. Old Pete passed away when Jack was 2, dying peacefully in his sleep. They buried him on the ranch in a spot overlooking the valley. Marcus and Danny stayed on, training new ranch hands as the operation grew. Ashton expanded the ranch over the years, buying up adjacent land, increasing the herd. He became known throughout Arizona Territory as a fair employer and an honest businessman. People respected him, and the ranch prospered. Melody threw herself into being a mother and a rancher's wife, but she also started teaching at the small school in Wilcox, passing on her love of learning to the next generation. She became known as a fierce advocate for children, especially girls, making sure they had opportunities she had never had. She never forgot where she had come from, never forgot standing on that auction block. She used her position and her husband's influence to lobby for laws against debt bondage, speaking out whenever she heard of someone being sold to pay off debts. Her uncle Raymond drank himself to death when she was 30, alone and unmourned. Melody did not attend his funeral. She had made peace with what had happened to her, but she could not forgive the man who had sold her like cattle. The children grew. Thomas fell in love with a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property and married her when he was 22. Emma, surprising everyone, became a lawyer, one of the first female lawyers in the territory. Jack followed in his father's footsteps, learning every aspect of ranching and preparing to take over the operation someday. Ashton and Melody grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, his hand in hers, comfortable in the silence. "You ever think about that day in Wilcox?" Melody asked one evening when they were both in their 50s. "Sometimes," Ashton admitted. "I thank God I was there. I cannot imagine my life without you." "I was so scared," Melody remembered, "standing on that platform thinking my life was over, and then you appeared and everything changed." "You changed my life too," Ashton said, squeezing her hand. "I was just going through the motions before you came along. You reminded me what it was like to really live." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as Thomas and his wife herded their grandchildren toward their wagon, the kids protesting that they did not want to leave. "We made a good life," Melody said softly. "We made a great life," Ashton corrected. "And we are not done yet. We still have years ahead of us." He was right. They had many more years, years of watching their grandchildren grow, of seeing Emma argue her first case in court, of seeing Jack marry and start his own family. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, weathered droughts and hard winters, faced challenges and triumphs together. When Ashton died, it was peacefully in his sleep, at the age of 78. Melody woke to find him gone, his hand still in hers, a slight smile on his face as if he had died dreaming of something pleasant. The grief was overwhelming, even though she had known it was coming. They had had 43 years together, years filled with love and laughter and hard work. But it did not feel like enough. It would never have been enough. She buried him on the hilltop where he had proposed to her, overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their children and grandchildren gathered around her, supporting her, but she felt hollow inside. For weeks after, she barely functioned. She sat on the porch in their chair, the one they had shared for so many evenings, and stared out at the land. She did not cry. She was beyond tears. It was Emma who finally got through to her. Her daughter sat down beside her one morning and took her hand. "Mama, I know you are hurting, but Papa would not want you to give up. He loved you so much, and he loved this life you built together. Honor that. Live for both of you now." Melody looked at her daughter, this fierce, brilliant woman she had raised, and felt something crack inside her. The tears finally came, great racking sobs that shook her whole body. Emma held her while she cried, and when the tears finally stopped, Melody felt like she could breathe again. She lived for another 12 years, staying active and involved in her children's and grandchildren's lives. She taught school until she was 80, finally retiring when her eyesight started to fail. She spent her last years on the ranch, the place that had been her salvation and her home. She sat on the porch in the evenings, feeling Ashton's presence beside her, remembering their life together. When her time came, she was 90 years old, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She had lived a long, full life, so different from the desperate girl who had stood on that auction block. Her last thoughts were of Ashton, of the moment he had burned that contract and given her freedom. She had loved him from that moment, and she loved him still, even in death. They buried her beside Ashton on the hilltop with a simple stone that read, "Melody Zeller, beloved wife, mother, and teacher." She knew what it meant to be free. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations. Each person who lived there heard the story of how it all began, of the rancher who burned a contract and the woman he loved. It became part of the family legend, a reminder that love could come from the darkest places, that freedom was worth fighting for, that kindness could change everything. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Arizona landscape, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, people swore they could see two figures on that hilltop, standing together, watching over the land they had built with love and determination and hope. The story of Ashton and Melody Zeller became a local legend in Wilcox, passed down through generations. Young couples would visit their graves, hoping some of their enduring love would bless their own relationships. The ranch remained a working cattle operation for over 100 years, each generation adding to the legacy, but keeping the heart of what Ashton and Melody had built. The house they had shared was preserved, turned into a small museum by their great-great-grandchildren. Visitors could walk through the rooms where they had lived, see Emma's bedroom where Melody had first stayed, stand in the kitchen where Ashton had first confessed his feelings. In the museum was a display that told their story, with photographs and documents and artifacts from their lives. But the centerpiece was a replica of the contract that Ashton had burned that day on the road from Wilcox. Beside it was a plaque that read, "In August 1883, Ashton Zeller paid $50 for a woman named Melody Keene, who was being sold by her uncle to pay for medicine." Instead of claiming his legal ownership, Ashton burned the contract and set her free. That act of kindness grew into a love that lasted 43 years and created a legacy that continues today. This is a reminder that one person's compassion can change the world, one life at a time. The schoolhouse where Melody taught was named in her honor, and a scholarship fund was established for young women pursuing education. Emma's law firm, which she had founded in Phoenix, and which grew to be one of the most prestigious in the state, still bore the name Zeller and Associates, carried on by her descendants. Thomas's children had taken over ranching operations across Arizona, building on the reputation for fairness and integrity that Ashton had established. Jack's line had gone into politics, with one of his great-granddaughters serving as a state senator and championing laws against human trafficking, carrying on Melody's work in a new era. The story of that August day in 1883 lived on, not just in family lore but in the collective memory of Wilcox and the surrounding territory. It became a story parents told their children, a story about how love could triumph over the worst circumstances, how freedom was the most precious gift one person could give another. Arizona had changed dramatically since that day. The wild frontier Ashton and Melody had known became cities and highways, but their ranch remained, a pocket of the Old West preserved by people who understood its significance. Every year on their wedding anniversary, December 25th, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. They would start at the graves on the hilltop, each person laying a flower and sharing a memory or a thought about what Ashton and Melody meant to them. Then they would return to the house for dinner, the same house where Ashton and Melody had shared so many meals. They would eat from the same china Melody had used, sit in chairs Ashton had built with his own hands, and tell stories late into the night. The children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would talk about their own lives, their successes and failures, their loves and losses. And always, they would come back to the story of how it all began, of the lonely rancher and the woman he saved, of a contract burned and a love that changed everything. Because that was the real legacy Ashton and Melody had left behind. Not just the ranch or the money or the family name, but the example of what love should be. Patient and kind, fierce and protective, built on respect and equality, and the fundamental belief that every person deserved freedom and dignity. Their story proved that the circumstances of how you met did not matter, that love could bloom in the most unlikely places, that choosing compassion over cruelty could ripple out in ways you never imagined. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind blew across the Arizona hills and the stars shone bright overhead, people swore they could hear laughter coming from that old ranch house, the sound of two people who had found joy in each other and never let it go. The ranch stood as a testament to their love, a physical reminder that one good choice, one moment of compassion, one person willing to see beyond the transaction to the human being beneath, could change not just one life but countless lives for generations to come. Melody had been sold to pay for medicine that arrived too late to save her mother. Ashton, the lonely rancher, had bought her and burned the contract, setting her free. But in doing so, he had also freed himself from the loneliness and guilt that had haunted him since his sister's death. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a love story that transcended the harsh realities of their time and place, a partnership of equals that produced not just children but a legacy of compassion and integrity that would outlive them both by many generations. Their story was complete, their circle closed. From the depths of despair to the heights of joy, from slavery to freedom, from loneliness to belonging, they had traveled the full arc of a life well lived and a love well earned. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for, to love and be loved, to make a difference in whatever way they could, to leave the world a little better than they found it. Ashton and Melody Zeller had done all that and more, and their story would live on as long as there were people who believed in the power of love to heal, to transform, to save.